So welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday. I'm glad you're here. So today, as we continue our theme on peace, we are going to talk about inner peace, that quality that we all hope to achieve, that equanimity, that balance that kind of sees us through times that are tough. There's a story in the Taoist tradition that I've told before, but I love it and I'm going to say it again. In case you haven't heard it, it's a wonderful story and it's a great way to remember the notion of inner peace. I'm taking this version of the story and the commentary on it from Taoist author Derek Lin. So, once upon a time in ancient China, the emperor was in his study. He was greatly agitated. He found it hard to concentrate. He was just upset and mad. And so he summoned his most trusted minister. And he said to him, "I wish I could focus on the affairs of state, but my mind is agitated and unsettled." I think we've all been there. "When I feel like this, I need something to help me regain peace. So have the best artist in the land create a painting that has the power to calm me down. I want the theme of this painting to be true tranquility. Find the best artists to create this painting for me." So a few days later, the minister reported there were 3 artists who were considered the best in the land, and he gave them the task and they began to paint. When the work was done, they all brought their paintings in, and the emperor went to the studio with the minister to see for himself what these paintings were. The first painting they saw was an image of a placid lake surrounded by beautiful mountains. Just think about that. A placid lake surrounded by beautiful mountains. It was wonderful. The surface of the lake was calm and still, and the painting just conveyed peace. The emperor said, "This is really beautiful. This is wonderful." So the second painting showed magnificent mountains covered in snow. It kind of evoked the silence in nature after a snowfall, a silence that is more than the absence of noise. It's so deep because snow seems to absorb any ambient sound. The emperor said, "Well, this is beautiful as well." The third painting showed a raging waterfall, a just loud, raging waterfall. "Oh," the minister said, "I'm so sorry, Your Highness. I don't think this artist understood his task at all. Let's just forget this painting and we'll go back and look at the first 2. The emperor stopped him and he said, "No, look." He said, "This is the painting for me." The emperor said, "I do not understand. This is not peaceful. It is a raging waterfall. How can it even compare to the other 2? The emperor said, "The thing in this painting is not the waterfall. Look again." The minister took another look at the painting and he saw that there was a tree next to the raging waterfall, and in that tree was a bird asleep inside a nest. The emperor said, "Look at that. See how this bird is able to be still, to rest, to sleep, even though the deafening torrent is so close. It has such a profound quietness. Within that, external conditions have no power to irritate or disturb. Now that is the essence of true tranquility." Right next to this raging waterfall, and yet the stillness inside, let it simply sleep. True tranquility, true peace, is that ability to remain calm and at peace while the torrent swirls around you. True inner peace really is when you can retain your center no matter what is happening. You carry it with you instead of looking around for the world to give it to you. So Derek Lin talks about this story a little more. He says it's very possible to take the above point of the story and leave it at that, and that's a good point, but there's more. It's also possible to dig a little deeper. So the first painting represents a calm lake. However, Lin suggests that this is really a superficial kind of tranquility. It's surface tranquility. The surface of the lake may be calm, but underneath we can't really see what's happening. There may be currents, life, activity, things that are not still. The lake looks peaceful, but the lake looked more peaceful than it probably actually was. So let's look at the painting of the snow. It represented an environment of peace, an environment of tranquility, a place that we look to find tranquility outside ourselves. Being in a place of tranquility, even extraordinary tranquility, such as was represented in that painting, does not guarantee us peace inside. It's simply being in a peaceful place. But that does not always mean that if we are not at peace, that peace translates to us. You know, they say wherever you go, you take yourself. If you are not at peace, you can be in the most beautiful, peaceful setting and still not be tranquil. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, the mind must be able to provide its own seclusion, even in crowded moments. So think of your own crowded moments. How much smoother would your journey be if you were able to find that peace within whenever needed? Well, we can. That's the journey, is to be able to find that peace within. And that's what the third picture illustrated. True tranquility, because it showed us that if we have a center of peace, it doesn't really matter what disruptions or what chaos surround us. Lynn writes, this is what the emperor actually needed. Not so much a tranquil environment, but a tranquil heart. So recalling that bird is a useful image when we find ourselves in times of high stress. We realize that maintaining peace in here is not about running away to a remote place where no one bothers us. It's about the serenity we carry within, no matter what our outside circumstances. That's the point of our spiritual practices, is to help us develop that peaceful center. We all have times that at times are more turbulent than we feel we can weather. That has been so true, especially this past year. It has surely proven that our COVID isolation and the changes in our lives that COVID has brought around, they really have taken us beyond what we have ever experienced. Life events that are challenging in and of themselves, absent COVID, have taken on additional challenges just because of the environment in which they happen. I remember when my son Nick and I spent those 2 weeks in Grady in July following his surgery. They were tough enough without adding the additional COVID stress. I remember coming back from his surgery. We spent a few days in one room and then they moved us to another room. And as I walked down the hall, it became apparent to me that it was a COVID overflow floor. And I thought, man, this was just stress I did not need, in addition to the stress of what was going on with his surgery. But there we were, and there was no escaping it. So when my life presents burdens that threaten to overwhelm me, I turn to the world's scriptures. And I've talked about that before. I gave a talk on how I turned to the Psalms immediately when I got back. I talked about Psalm 61 and the strength that it gave me. I know that for me, this choice, the way I deal with it myself, is the only way for me to climb out of that particular hole. I am so grateful every day for the gifts of wisdom that are available to me and to us through the wisdom of the world's different faith traditions. And as an interspiritual community, how lucky are we? Because we get to learn them all, we get to celebrate them all. When I seek peace, frequently the first scriptures I turn to are the Hindu Upanishads. And I want to focus on them today. My goal today is to leave you with the suggestion that these scriptures may be a place for you to find peace as well. One of the joys that we have here at One World is sharing the tools we find useful on our spiritual paths. And today I just want to celebrate these foundational early explorations of human consciousness. They are simply amazing. Add them to your collection because they will take you on an astonishing journey if you will let them. These writings are really miraculous when you think about them. I think perhaps because we like patting ourselves on the back, we tend to think of the arc of human consciousness, of the awakening of human consciousness, as kind of a linear thing, with earlier generations focusing on a more primitive God, a more judgmental God, a father figure we must placate, a judge, something separate, the man in the sky, not the more advanced image of the divine that many have today. As we progressed, we like to think, we moved into the understanding that spirit is all, is everything, is what we call immanent, while at the same time being transcendent, pervading all aspects of our world, being all aspects of our world, and yet transcending our world. So we like to think, as we approach this notion of the divine, that we are pretty sophisticated. So we can feel pretty cocky about our adult understanding of spirit until we realize that we are only rediscovering the wisdom of the Indian sages who gave us the Upanishads over 2,500 years ago. We stand on their shoulders when we meditate or when we talk about the depths of human consciousness or the divine within. That is the wisdom they gave us. When we undertake any path or practice aimed at awakening the amazing vistas within ourselves, we have the rishis of the late Vedic period and the Upanishads to thank. As they moved away from the ritualism of the early Vedic period, focused on exterior deities, something led them to turn their gaze to the vast world within each of us, to the exploration of human consciousness. It was an amazing shift. They turned away from the ritual practice, realizing that the richness of human experience, that the divine lay within. They gave us the idea that the truth of God was within, and we could know it. That ultimate reality was one, and if we could know it, it would lead us to joy. It was an amazing time, and we stand on the shoulders of these amazing visionaries. No mediation, no priests, just you and the infinite. Just you and the infinite. It was an amazing insight that these mystics gave us. It was the first exploration of our vast inner space. So the word Upanishad means to sit alongside, as one sits at the feet of one's spiritual teacher. The Upanishads, most of them, are primarily in the form of a dialogue, because in that tradition there was a great deal of stress on the importance of a spiritual teacher. The authors of these scriptures are largely anonymous. The emphasis is on the insights, not on the person who wrote them. In addition, they're not always easy to read. They're not chronological stories such as you might find in the Hebrew or the Christian scriptures, but they are bursts of insight. They are not always clear. You have to sit with them for their richness to be revealed. The version of the Upanishads that I use and that I like is a translation by Eknath Ishwaran, an Indian teacher of Victorian literature who later transitioned to become a teacher of meditation and spirituality. And so the story of his journey, how he made that journey, is a wonderful example of the gift of these teachings and these insights. So in the late 50s, he was teaching on a college campus in central India. He was a husband, a father, a son. He was living a life just like the rest of us, going to work, raising a family. But he began to be haunted by the central questions of our existence. Why am I here? What happens when I die? What is my purpose? He did not know where to turn for answers to these questions that would not go away. So at the same time, two people that he loved did die. One was Mahatma Gandhi, whom he knew personally, and the other one was his grandmother, who in addition to being a beloved relative, was also his spiritual teacher. Then, the story goes, he returned home one day to find that his dog had been killed by a truck. So the combination of these miseries, brought to a head by the death of his dog, brought him to that place of despair where we have all been. He was overwhelmed with loss and with uncertainty. He needed the answers to those questions which remained unanswered. So what did he do? This is what he writes. Almost instinctively, he said, I went to my room and picked up my Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, most of which I knew by heart. I closed my eyes, and as I began to repeat the verses silently to myself, the words opened up and took me deep, deep in. I love the energy of that phrase. As he sat silently, the words took him deep, deep in. So he was familiar with the Gita. He just said he almost knew it by heart. But this time, he let its words seep in beyond his thinking mind, into his awareness, into his heart. The action, it was a mix of deep wisdom, stillness, and his willingness to sit and simply listen. I got to tell you, his description so speaks to me. When I feel overwhelmed or adrift, I turn to these writings that remind me of what is true. They lift me beyond myself. I remember sitting in Grady Hospital during that 2 weeks in one of those visiting chairs, that kind of folds out, and reading the Gita myself. And it was a lifeline, a boat that would see me through those turbulent waters. The passage as he described it for Ishwaran was the beginning of his meditation practice. It was also the beginning of a practice that he came to call passage meditation. And we've done this here at One World. He taught it for years. In this practice, you focus on you pick a scripture you like, you focus on a particular passage, and you simply sit with it. You let its wisdom simply enter into you in ever unfolding ways. Try it with a favorite passage of yours from any book, from any scripture. You don't think about it. It's not a cognitive activity. You let the passage seep into your heart, your deeper consciousness. It's almost like you're in dialogue with it. You just sit and let it speak to you. So, what is the message of the Upanishads that has so influenced spiritual seekers for over 2,000 years? Author Houston Smith puts it this way. He writes, "The message is that you are more than you think. That you are more than you think." That is a mind-bending thought if you sit and just think about it. There are depths to you, an imperishable truth of you that you can find and experience and even become. You yourself are the stuff of God, or Brahman, as God is called in that tradition, the essence of all being, the unity beyond all multiplicities. When you experience that reality of being itself, you awaken to absolute truth and perfect bliss. From the Taittiriya Upanishad comes these verses. The self is the source of abiding joy. That's self with a big S. The self is the source of abiding joy. Our hearts are filled with joy in seeing him enshrined in the depths of our consciousness. If he were not there, who would breathe? Who live? He it is who fills every heart with joy. When one realizes the self, in whom all life is one, changeless, nameless, formless, then one fears no more. Until we realize the unity of life, we live in fear. Knowledge of the One, that we are of the One, brings us perfect joy and eliminates fear. So, I can hear what you're thinking, because I have thought it as well. I may be the self, I may be a manifestation of the One, and that is just great, but there is no way that I will ever be able to meditate myself to a place of bliss. Get real. I may achieve peace for a few minutes, at least until the bell on my meditation app goes off and I have to get up and get back to work, but I'm not going to find permanent bliss. I think not. So the good news is that it's not an either-or thing. Every step on this journey creates greater peace. Every step changes you. Do not stop, because you ultimately will not be able to meditate yourself into perfect bliss. I cannot meditate myself into perfect bliss, but every time I try it, I achieve greater peace. If I continue to do it, it gives me greater resources, it gives me greater stability, and my life is more peaceful. For most of us, this is not a journey in which we arrive at a destination. The joy and the awakening and the growing peace is in the journey. It's taking the first step and then the next step and staying with it that makes all the difference. Pema Chodron puts it this way. She says when you sit on your meditation cushion or on your chair, you just need to stay. Just stay. The Upanishads remind us that there is a unity underlying all things, and it is who we are. We are more than this problem, this body, even this life. Absolute reality is Brahman, the essence of all that is, and we are that as well. Our individual bodies, all the multiplicity we see, are simply manifestations of the One. The Katha Upanishad puts it this way: as the same fire assumes different shapes when it consumes objects differing in shape, so does the One Self take the shape of every creature in which he is present. Isn't that a great image? The same fire takes the shape of every creature in which he is present. It's the same fire. It's the same One. So I am the One appearing as Melanie, but it doesn't change the essence of who I am. My challenge is to move beyond the illusion that I am just this body, this personality, this constellation of experience, understanding, and memory. I am more than that, and you are more than that. So, in practicality, does this mean that our problems don't matter? That we just kind of rise above them? That we just see them as insignificant because, after all, we are the One, so why are we worried about life's problems? No, not at all. The circumstances of our lives have profound impact on us, and nobody is saying that we need to ignore them. We are here in these bodies, in these lives. The sages of the Upanishad had families. They worked, they grieved, they suffered, they raised children just as we do. The message of these teachings is that these circumstances are not all there is. They point to a beyond. They point to a more. They don't tell us to ignore our difficulties, but they tell us that there is a foundational truth beyond them. Again, from the Katha Upanishad. As the sun, who is the eye of the world, cannot be tainted by the defects in our eyes, nor by the objects it looks on, so the One Self, dwelling in all, cannot be tainted by the evils of the world, for the Self transcends all. It just tells us that there is more, and that is a very heartening thought. In the same way these teachings tell you who and what Brahman is, they also tell you who you are. They tell you that you are not small, you are not weak, you are not alone and adrift. You are a manifestation of Brahman, the essence of all that is. You have a place to be, and you are in it. In hard times, this wisdom grounds me and supports me and gives me courage and hope. That is the truth of each of us, beyond problems, beyond pain, beyond loss. So far from removing us from this world, these teachings give us a grounding to engage in it more deeply. As Ishwaran himself said, the passages were lifelines, guiding me to the source of wisdom deep within, and then guiding me back into daily life. Gandhi said, "Such power as I possess for working in the political field has derived from my experiments in the spiritual field." At the end of the day, it's an inside job. It is your own journey. One of the giants of Hindu spirituality was Adi Shankara, an 8th century mystic who wrote and taught on the unity of Brahman, which is all-pervading reality, and the Atman, which is the same self within and as each of us. This is what he wrote. Teachers and scriptures can stimulate spiritual awareness, but the wise disciple crosses the ocean of ignorance by direct illumination through the grace of God. Gain experience directly. Realize God for yourself. Know the self as the one indivisible being and become perfect. Free your mind from all distractions and dwell in the consciousness of the self. This is the final declaration of the Vedanta. Brahman is all. It is this universe and every creature. To be liberated is to live in the continual awareness of Brahman, the undivided reality. To be liberated is to find peace. Every step on this journey makes a difference. Finally, and this is an added benefit of the Upanishads, the passages are beautiful. They are just uplifting. They are inspirational. They speak of love and of joy in ways that make our hearts sing, and even better, that make us remember. That is, after all, what profound wisdom does. It reminds us of what we already and always knew, but perhaps have forgotten. So I hope you take the opportunity to spend some time with the Upanishads. So to give you a greater sense of their beauty and their depth and their meaning, I'd like to close with a reading by Kathleen Reeder from the Katha Upanishad. Thanks so much.
Our reading this morning is from the Katha Upanishads. As long as we think we are the ego, we feel attached and fall into sorrow. But realize that you are the self, the Lord of life, and you will be freed from sorrow. When you realize that you are the self, supreme being of light, supreme being of love, you transcend the duality of life and enter into the unitive state. The Lord of love shines in the hearts of all, seeing him in all creatures. The wise forget themselves in the service of all. The Lord is their joy, the Lord is their rest, such as they are the lovers of the Lord.